this evening. David?
Yeah, we're looking at live pictures here, Jeff, of Lafayette Plaza. We saw the police presence there outside the Renwick Gallery just a couple of blocks away a moment ago as well. Let me turn to Garrett Haake, who made that journey from Vienna to Washington with these white supremacists. Garrett, I know you saw that application as well, the one filed by the organizers of this rally. It was more than a dozen pages in length. What can we expect from them today? What did you hear from those who are participating? What's going to happen at 5:30 p.m.?
Well, a couple of things on that point, David. On the application, they list speakers including David Duke, the former leader of the KKK. In my brief interview with Jason Kessler, the organizer of this event, he seemed befuddled that that was even on there, suggesting a lack of knowledge, a lack of organization about this event that has been true in appearance from the word go. We probably had about 24 of these Unite the Right rally attendees showing up at that Vienna metro station. A good portion of them did not have metro cards, so their dramatic march into the station was foiled by a trip to the machines to buy metro cards. On the way in, I had a chance to talk to some of these folks, including two young men who told me they were from New Jersey. They would not take off the masks that were over their face. And while Kessler was telling me that this was not a racist movement, these men were telling me that the white race here in the United States, they say, is the founding stock. That was their exact phrase of the United States, and that would make them, white men, more American than other non-white Americans. They're saying this to me 10 feet away from the organizer, who's also trying to say that this is not a racial event. So all of that being said, and with perhaps 24 protesters, I mean, truly, there are maybe 3 times as many police officers behind me right now than there were attendees coming down on that metro train. I think it's going to be difficult to say what, if anything, happens in that park in terms of an actual rally. And David, I'm going to put on my meteorologist hat here for just a second. I'm starting to feel a little tiny bit of rain from a public safety standpoint. That's probably the best thing that D.C. police could hope for today, to disperse this enormous crowd of counter-protesters here who came out to make sure that these folks from the Unite the Right effort knew that they were not welcome here, that their message was not welcome here, and that they will be drowned out by this larger group. That will certainly be true. I suppose the question is, drowned out with what? Will all of this stay peaceful? Will all of this stay a situation where these groups are facing off with only words? I think that's a significant hope here. And obviously the reason for this enormous presence by the MPD, which, as Jeff so rightly noted, is almost inarguably the most prepared police force in the world to handle events like this, because they do it so often, David.
All right, Garrett, we're going to check in with you in just a little bit. Garrett Haake usually covers Congress. He's covering this protest for us today. I'm reminded of what happened after the events in Charlottesville last year in Boston, Massachusetts, where a protest of white supremacists, white nationalists there in downtown Boston was quite literally surrounded by counter-protesters, well drowned out by those who had showed up to protest what was happening there. As you look at what's happening in Washington, D.C. today, quite evidently, the might of the counter-protest really much larger than what we're seeing when you look at that group of white supremacists. I want to go to Mike Vaquera now. He's in what's known as the buffer zone there in Washington, D.C. Help us with that bit of geography there. I think we're wondering here where there could be potential for conflict as you see these two groups both protesting at the same time, Mike.
David, this is a great question, because the police and law enforcement coordinating together are really going out of their way to make sure that these two groups do not come together. There you see David Kessler and his group with the American flag. I think that, as Garrett has noted, the press outnumbers his group by a substantial number. Just to the left of them, you've seen David Kessler. To the south of them, he's been posing in front of the White House. This is how close we are to the actual White House. Of course, President Trump is in New Jersey. But the most impressive number, and perhaps the most impressive sight, is this. All of these protesters kept, as you can see, a significant distance from Kessler and his group of white nationalists or white supremacists, as you like it. Very loud. They've marched up. We marched with many of them from just around the corner at Freedom Plaza. The police have gone to extraordinary lengths to keep everyone apart. You see the buffer areas here. They're bringing some press in now to get some shots of the white nationalists there. Again, exponentially increasing the number of press as compared to the protesters who are actually here, and even fewer of them who dare to show their face. So we have a scene here in Lafayette Park, a phalanx of police. You see them in their fluorescent blaze vests there, keeping everyone apart. There are horses off to the side. You don't see them. That could be deployed at any minute if the situation were to warrant it. At this point, it doesn't look that way. There's a lot of emotion here, most of it coming from the anti-white nationalists, the anti-Nazi, anti-fascist factions to the north of the park there, far outnumbering by 500 to 1, I'm going to guess, those who came on the Metro with Kessler's group, him moving back now in front of the White House, trailed by all kinds of press taking his picture. David.
My colleague Mike Vaquera there at Lafayette Plaza. Just to paint a picture here, it's about 2 blocks wide, 1 block high. At the northern side, you've got the Hay Adams Hotel, you've got the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It is a very compact, a very small place, and as Mike was illustrating for us there, it is well partitioned on this Sunday afternoon. I want to bring into the conversation former Congressman David Jolly now for his perspective on what's going on here. David, what do you make here as you look at what's happening in Washington, D.C. on this Sunday afternoon? When you look at the size of that counter-protest in contrast to the, as we've heard from my colleagues Jeff Bennett and Garrett Haake, roughly 24 white supremacists who have shown up there on the front lawn of the White House.
Yeah, look, we should all feel encouraged that the voices of peace, the voices of sanity, those who are asking for equality, who embrace diversity, are actually outnumbering the white nationalists and the racists today. But David, we also have to be very honest that we need to pray for and hope for and wish for safety in this. If you look back at Charlottesville, it was one person driving a car that took the life of Heather Heyer. And so this is not a moment where we can merely look at the numbers and suggest that perhaps good has won over evil. We do need to watch these next few hours very carefully. We also can't extract the politics out of this. I mean, we know that we are living through a time in American politics where the issues of race are heightened. And there are contributors to that conversation, including the President of the United States himself.
Just below you on the screen, we saw the organizer of this rally talking to reporters. Didn't hear from him, but that's taking place right now in Lafayette Plaza. I want to take your last point and broaden it here just a little bit. You have this protest today. You have the counter-protest again, which is many magnitudes larger than the protest here arranged by white supremacists in Washington, D.C. Where do we go from here, David? Here we are commemorating this, the anniversary of what happened in Charlottesville last year. Earlier in the program, we put up a poll from CBS News indicating that most Americans don't believe that the conversation about race has gotten better in this country over the last year. Indeed, many think it has gotten worse. A majority of Americans surveyed think that the president has not done anything measurably to improve race relations in this country. From a policy perspective, what has to happen next year, David Jolly?
Yeah, look, most Americans are right. I mean, the last time I remember a scene like this, personally, in my own life, and every American has their own walk of life, was in the 1980s. I mean, this was 30 or 40 years ago, where you saw, at the time for me, it was the KKK in a very rural county that decided to have a demonstration at the courthouse. I think the issue most people are wrestling with is that this is a president, through his own politics, that's given an invitation or an affirmation or permission to certain voices on the alt-right or those who are on the extreme right. He has almost recognized them. The fact that David Duke is now a matter of political conversation, affirming not just the president a year or so ago, but affirming a Fox News leading television host just in the last week for her own comments. This is where leadership really does matter. We have not seen this from Democrats or Republicans until we've seen this Trump administration. And it is a change in the national dialogue, and it's one that a lot of Americans rightfully are concerned about.
David Duke, a matter of political conversation. I would add the word again to that. And I want to ask you about regressiveness. Right. I want to ask you about regressiveness, where we are as a country. There was a time in this country where we did talk about David Duke when he had that leadership position in the Ku Klux Klan. What does it say to you that in the year 2018 he has reared his head in our policy conversations once again?
David, I love the way you frame that question, because I believe it was the late 80s or early 90s where he was actually a candidate for Senate or governor. He was rejected, and Republicans proudly rejected him. Now he is a voice of affirmation. And this is where the president's words have fallen short. It truly. And we have to ask Donald Trump for greater leadership on this. I don't believe we will see it. But, you know, what we saw in Charlottesville a year ago from the president, the most authentic moments of a political leader happen in real time. And the both sides comment that he made, the notion that there are good people on both sides, that is the heart of Donald Trump. And nothing he can say or tweet this weekend will really change that. And I think what the American people wrestle with is how do you give a second chance to somebody who's lost their credibility on issues of race? And I believe for many Americans, including myself, we found ourselves in a place where you really can't give the president a second shot here.
Former Congressman David Jolley, it's always good to speak with you. Thank you very much for your perspective here
You too.
on this Sunday. Much more on that ragtag protest of about 24 racists on the front lawn of the White House in Washington, D.C., surrounded, as you see there, by hundreds of counter-protesters looking at Lafayette Plaza just outside the White House in Washington, D.C. Much more to come here on MSNBC.
At Ally, we're doing digital financial services right. But if that's not enough, we have more than 8,000 allies looking out for one thing, you.
Call in the next 10 minutes.
And if that's not enough, we'll look after your every dollar.
Put down the phone.
And if that's not enough, we'll look after your every cent.
Grab your wallet.
And if that's still not enough to help you save, we'll bring out the dogs.
The old one's just fine.
We'll do anything, seriously, anything to help our customers. Ally, do it right.
I've been making blades here at Gillette for 20 years. There's a lot of innovation that goes into making America's #1 shave. Precision machinery and high-quality materials from around the world. Nobody else even comes close. Now starting at $7.99. Gillette, the best a man can get.
How do you win at business? Stay at La Quinta, where we're changing with stylish makeovers. Then, at your next meeting, set your seat height to its maximum level. Bravo, tall meeting man. Start winning today. Book now at LQ.com.
What will you discover with a lens made by Essilor? Sharper vision, without limits. Days that go from sun up to sundown. A whole world in all its beauty. 3 innovative technologies for our ultimate in vision, clarity, and protection. Together in a single lens. Essilor Ultimate Lens Package. Purchase the Essilor Ultimate Lens Package and get a second pair of qualifying lenses free. Essilor. Better sight, better life.
Hi, I'm Lisa. Definitely would like to meet someone special.
Looking for a real relationship?
So I definitely would like to find a long-term relationship. Somebody who is smart, who has an excellent sense of humor. Can't wait to meet you. Bye.
Check out Match right now for free.
Wireless for $15 a month. That's not right.
It's right, all right. Finger dipping? That's not right.
That did look good. Oh, that does look good. You gotta try this. That's so good.
That's not right.
Neither is the way you get wireless. Mint Mobile took what's wrong with wireless and made it right. For easy, online, and just $15 a month. Get your plan today at mintmobile.com.
You might take something for your heart or joints, but do you take something for your brain? With an ingredient originally discovered in jellyfish, Prevagen has been shown in clinical trials to improve short-term memory. Prevagen, healthier brain, better life.
It's easy to think that all money managers are pretty much the same. But while some push high-commission investment products, Fisher Investments avoids them. Some advisors have hidden and layered fees. Fisher Investments never does. And while some advisors are happy to earn commissions from you, whether you do well or not, Fisher Investments fees are structured so we do better when you do better. Maybe that's why most of our clients come from other money managers. Fisher Investments, clearly better money management.
We have a bunch of questions. Have we ever seen anything like that before in American governance? Did this thing actually end? Is it still going on? Am I asking the right questions here? That's the heart of the matter, right? Should those dots be connected? Do I have that right? Am I right to see it that way? How are we supposed to know? What do you make of that decision? Is that accurate? What does that sound like to you? Is that weird? What does that mean? Sounds a little nuts, right? Is it fair to say? What's going on with that? Why is this happening? Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? Lots more to get to tonight. Stay with us.
Welcome back as we continue to monitor what's happening in Washington, D.C. That protest arranged by white supremacists scheduled to start at 5:30 Eastern Time in Lafayette Plaza, just north of the White House. 4 boxes here on your screen. Most of what you see are the counter-protests in Washington, D.C. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people have shown up there in Lafayette Square to protest that protest that's scheduled to start at 5:30 Eastern Time. My colleagues Garrett Hake, Jeff Bennett continue to give us coverage of what's going on there, again, right outside the White House on that 7-acre park. Well, over the past year, we have seen students confront these challenging issues facing this nation. Joining me now is a student activist, Nupoki Zolo, and on the front lines of confronting racism as well, we have Janae Nelson. She's with the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Funds. Nupo, let me start with you. I want to get your perspective on where we are today. You were in Charlottesville last year.
Yes.
When it devolved into the violence that we saw there. What happened on that day for you? How did it change your perspective on things, being there in Charlottesville last year?
Honestly, surviving Charlottesville showed me how far we have not come with race relations in America.